Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. Do us a favor, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell for notifications, upvote, and comment as well. I'm here with our weekly feature with Pratt Rogers. We're talking a little bit of recruiting. How you doing, Pratt?
I'm doing great. How are you, Steven?
Man, I'm just absolutely fantastic. I don't know if I could be much better. I mean,
It,
it's
it's
just a pity that everybody isn't like me.
well, it's a beautiful day here in Memphis too. So I'm not complaining either. How about that?
All right, let's start with the bad news. There's two decommitments that have happened over the last couple of days. One is Isaiah Autry. He's a kid from around the Tupelo area, and Ole Miss just had trouble getting kids out of that area for whatever reason it is. Isaiah Autry is a cousin of Marcus Dupree, who is an Oklahoma football legend. So, I mean, little that kind of tweaked the scenario that we thought we had once we found that out. Everybody's like, okay, Oklahoma's involved. Marcus Dupree, his second cousin, is taking him up there. That probably changes the calculus. What do you think?
You know, you always hate losing an in-state guy to an out-of-state program. That stings for sure. But like you said, the connections with Dupree being Oklahoma athlete and that's a little bit different. You hate to see somebody like LSU come in and pick your top guys out of the state, but the ties are, I mean, it's almost existential, maybe the right word of not a whole lot you can do about it when the guy's kind of mentor is in his ear telling him to go to Oklahoma. I know he was kind of Ole Miss desperately wanted him, don't get me wrong, but I think also Ole Miss probably had a hard time, from kind of my understanding, telling him what position he would play. I think he was kind of a tweener size. I think height wise he was fine, but I think weight wise he was kind of, oh, do we want to put him in left tackle? He's not, or do we want to put him at guard? I mean, I think that kind of played a role in what he was hearing from our coaching staff. I'm sure it didn't help, but yeah, I mean, I get this one, Steven. Oklahoma, I get it. I'm not too beat up about it. It stinks. You want to keep all the in-state guys, no doubt, but there's other guys that we're chasing, and I think we're a little bit on the up and up with.
Yeah, and there's another kid that committed just Tuesday. Brady Preiskorn committed to Michigan. John Garcia was on my show this past Saturday, where he said if Preiskorn waits, that is good for Ole Miss. If he commits early, he's going to Michigan, and he went to Michigan. He'd been to Michigan more than any other school, but just because of the link, that probably got Ole Miss into the game a little bit, but it was going to always be hard to get a Michigan kid away from Michigan if they want him.
Well, you mentioned the link, yeah, being Caden Preiskorn's brother got us in the game, but I think that will also keep us in the game. I don't think these are. I don't think this is a player that we're going to quit recruiting throughout the cycle just because he commits to Michigan. Doesn't mean. I mean, he's good enough that we're going to stay on him for the duration of the 2024 recruiting cycle, no doubt. So look, I think if anybody's got a good chance, it's Ole Miss with his brother being on campus. Like I said, it's hard to pull somebody, 1,000 miles away to come to Oxford. But, if your brother's on campus, that at least gives you a fighting chance till the last day of signing period, That's how I look at it.
Yeah, and that is the bad news coming into recruiting, if it's even bad news, because it is still April, by the way. But let's talk about some good news. Ole Miss is surging with Caleb Odom, the tight end out of Georgia. He is kind of a hand-picked person of Damon Williams, who is Ole Miss's quarterback commitment. And that seems to be going quite well at the moment. The rumor is Ole Miss is offering, saying, hey, you're going to come here and get to play wide receiver, which I think they mean more of a stand-up tight end like they used Evan Ingram. But what do you think about Caleb?
I think Caleb is an exceptional athlete. I think it would be a huge win for the Rebs, and I think it would be a near miracle sometimes if we could pull this off. But, yeah, I mean, he's 6'5", 215, 220, something like that. And like you mentioned, he definitely is hearing from our staff about playing receiver. I know that he put Ole Miss in his top 8 recently on a list that he put out on Twitter. I think that included like Georgia, Miami, Colorado, Tennessee, a few others, Penn State, maybe, Bama, I'm sure. But yeah, so I mean, I think we're really in the game with him. I know he's just an exceptional athlete based off the fact, I think I mentioned on a previous podcast, as a 10th grader, he was like Region 6A, all first team in basketball too. So I mean, he's somebody that's almost reminds you of a Trigg or something like that, where you sit there and say, gosh, his hyper athleticism is what gets him on the field. It's not necessarily his work ethic and, his mental capacity. It's, hey, he is a freak athlete and he deserves to be on the field. That's kind of how I'm looking at Caleb Odom. I mean, he's a top 80 recruit in the nation. I mean, the guy's a baller.
Yeah, and he has a chance to come in and be fairly special. We're developing tight ends, kind of a tight end roster of a depth chart that has a chance to be pretty good down the line. And that's not even including Michael Trigg. That is just clearly based on what's behind him at the moment.
No doubt. And, no doubt on that. And like you mentioned earlier about his connection with Damon Williams as a current Ole Miss commit is huge for us too. And, I think that there's a lot of bonding going on and symmetry with the Ole Miss recruiting staff. And I know that LSU kind of offered him to play basketball and football. And I think that was his first kind of dual scholarship approach, which I'm sure sticks with him too on that. But yeah, I'm very bullish on this kid. I think this would be incredible. I would be so excited to land Caleb Odom and get him on campus soon.
Yeah, and the NFL draft is set to go, and depending on when you're watching this, let's just say tomorrow, if you're watching this on Wednesday. So who do you think is the first off the board? Is it Zach Evans or is it Jonathan Mingo, and why?
Gosh, if you had asked me a year and a half ago, it would be a no-brainer, Zach Evans, first-round pick. And I just from being on Twitter, I just am feeling everybody saying Zach Evans didn't have he didn't participate in all the combine drills and all that. He's been banged up. We all know that. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he slipped to third, fourth, fifth round maybe. I mean, you can't imagine a guy like Zach Evans being that late. But, I mean,
Alvin Kamara slipped down to there.
I know. And you sit there and say, how can this happen? But weirder things happen. And you've been hearing the opposite about Mingo. Of everybody. I mean, I saw something on Twitter the other day that somebody said he could come out to be a first-round draft pick. I think that's exceptionally high, but everybody is saying that he's trending up. And believe it or not, a lot of his metrics are very similar to A.J. Brown. A lot of people have kind of mentioned that he can be the next AJ from Ole Miss, like his vertical stuff like that, and he even topped out higher than AJ in some of those categories. Look, it's not all about metrics, but that's a great comparison,
Yeah, I just don't think Jonathan Mingo is an AJ Brown type wide receiver. I do think Jonathan Mingo is a good wide receiver, but I just don't think he's AJ or DK. I think people see his numbers and they compare him to AJ, and they want to make that correlation. But if you watch the film and actually watch him play the game, other than the Vanderbilt game, which he was absolutely the man in, he didn't really turn up after that. It was a bunch of 3 or 4 catch games where you just can't picture any scenario where AJ would do something like that. It's just my opinion.
I agree. But that Vandy game, their scouts sitting there in the back of their minds saying, hey, he can go replicate this in the right offense. So, I think to answer a long way of answering your question, I think Mingo gets drafted first and before Zach Evans, and I think it's probably late second round, which I think would be great. And I commend him for that. What about you?
I think Mingo goes first. But I think Mingo, honestly, he'll be a solid number 2. He's a guy that will be a number 2 wide receiver for 10 years. He's compared to Anquan Bolden on the NFL website. I can see a lot in his game to where I think he will hang around and do that for a long, long time in the NFL. I just don't think he's a number 1. I don't think he's an AJ. I don't think he's a DK. I think if you have a number 1 on your team, you draft Jonathan Mingo because he will be a number 2 that makes you better, if that makes any sense.
No doubt. I'm completely agree with that, and I think he's a great team player, and I think that's saying a lot for a number 2 guy in itself too.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get out of here, what is your big off-season point that you're looking forward to?
Hopefully some cornerbacks in the portal, Stephen. What about you?
Honestly, the Flash and the Indiana Jones movies are the 2 off-season things that are on my mind at the moment.
Yeah, I just haven't been feeling a whole lot of really good portal news recently, and we've talked about ad nauseum that we're not really expecting that in this portal. Yeah. But it's still, you kind of were a little hopeful going in, like, oh, look, maybe we could add 4, 5, 6 bodies, and especially on defense. And I'm just not feeling that right now at all.
We got 4 days for people to get into the portal, and that's what this is. This whole window is for people that can get into the portal. After that, this recruiting is going to go on for the next month or 2.
Yeah.
And people that are looking forward to this acting quickly, I think it's just kind of fool's gold at the moment. They kind of confuse a college football transfer portal window with like a soccer transfer window where it has to be done by that end day.
But you got to think the sooner the better for the student athlete, right? I mean, the sooner he makes the move, the quicker he can learn the playbook, get accustomed to campus, and acclimated in the city. I mean, you got to think the sooner the better.
I think the quickest they can get here is like May 28th.
That sounds right. I'm not sure, Steve.
And there's a whole bunch of players that are going to come in and get the playbook and get indoctrinated. So you have time. You have a month to start finding people and signing people. You do not have to rush it. But you're absolutely right. I do want to hear some names, especially before the beginning of the summer.
Well, let me ask you this, Stephen. Do you believe that if a guy comes in, like you mentioned, got to put your name in the portal now, and that can go on for months. If a guy reaches out to Ole Miss, and even let's assume that he's just an absolute take for every program in the nation, and he reaches out in August, I mean, do you foresee somebody in late August, or maybe mid-August before the actual games start, that guy gets playing time, even if he has the talent to do it?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I don't think anybody's going to get in the transfer portal that warrants something like that. I agree with that. Yeah, before fall camp, everybody that's going to get signed is going to be signed. Now, you're going to see some people that sign up and just get emergency. They drop the ball. They're going FCS in August because the camps have started all over the place, and those coaches aren't dealing with them anymore. But those FCS schools will do it. So we'll see exactly how that goes. I expect this transfer portal to be all kind of done and dusted by June 15th. By second summer, this will be good to go.
Yep, I think it's kind of got to be. So
Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Every dayers tomorrow on the show, there could be a special guest. We're trying to organize technology to make this happen. If it does, you'll be very impressed. I don't want to give the name right now, but it is something that is an extension on this channel and something everybody can be proud of. A lot of hard work has gone into getting stuff like this. So tune in for that whenever you see it. You'll know when it happens, but we are expecting, technology permitting, that he'll be on at least by the end of the week. It might be Friday, just so it has the weekend so everybody can watch it. Pratt, thank you very much for stopping by today for your weekly segment. We'll talk to you next week, buddy.
Awesome. See you, man.
All right.